There was a moment in history when a single flower bulb cost more than a house. Not a rare painting, not gold, a tulip, a thing you could accidentally step on and kill, and an entire country, one of the richest and smartest in the world at the time, bet their homes, their savings, and their futures on it. Then, in the span of a few days, it all vanished. Fortunes turned to dust. This actually happened, and the reason it matters to you has nothing to do with flowers, and everything to do with a pattern of human behavior that has repeated in every generation since, including our own. So let me tell you the story of the day the world went mad over tulips. To understand how this happened, you have to picture the Netherlands in the early 1600s. This was the Dutch Golden Age. The country was newly independent, its merchants were getting fabulously rich off global trade, and Amsterdam had become the financial capital of the world. There was money everywhere, and with money came a hunger for status, for beautiful, rare things that said, "Look how successful I am." And into that hungry, wealthy country arrived an exotic newcomer from the Ottoman Empire, the tulip. At first, tulips were simply a luxury for the rich, but not just any tulips. The truly prized ones were the so-called broken tulips, bulbs infected with a virus that made their petals erupt in wild streaks and flames of color, unlike anything else in Europe. They were rare, they were stunning, and they became the ultimate symbol of wealth. If you had one of these in your garden, you had arrived, and that is where a simple luxury quietly turned into something far more dangerous, because people stopped buying tulips to plant them and started buying them purely to sell them again for more. This is the exact moment a normal market becomes a mania. As prices climbed, ordinary people noticed something intoxicating. Anyone who bought a bulb and resold it a few weeks later was making money, serious money. Word spread and the fever took hold. And here's the part that sounds almost impossible. It wasn't just wealthy merchants. Historical accounts describe bakers, carpenters, chimney sweeps, maids, and farmers all pouring into the tulip trade. People mortgaged their homes. They sold their livestock, their furniture, their family heirlooms, all to buy tulip bulbs they were certain would make them rich. A plumber flipping flower bulbs between jobs was suddenly wealthier than the nobleman he worked for. Then it got even more detached from reality. People stopped even trading actual flowers. They began trading paper contracts, promises to buy a bulb at a future date. A single bulb still in the ground might be bought and sold 10 times over the winter by people who never saw it and never intended to plant it. It was a paper economy floating completely free of anything real centuries before anyone had a word for it. At the peak, in the winter of 1636, prices went vertical. Some of the rarest bulbs jumped 12-fold in a matter of weeks. The most legendary bulb of all, the Semper Augustus, reportedly sold for around 6,000 florins. To put that in perspective, that was enough to buy one of the grandest canal houses in Amsterdam, roughly $750,000 in today's money, for a flower. If you're enjoying this story, do me a quick favor and subscribe. This channel digs into the money lessons history keeps trying to teach us. Now let me tell you how it all came crashing down. For a while, everyone in the chain was happy, because as long as there was always someone willing to pay more, the game worked. Every buyer assumed they'd sell to a bigger fool tomorrow. But bubbles run on one silent, fragile assumption, that the next buyer will always show up. And one day, in a routine tulip auction in the city of Haarlem in February 1637, the next buyer simply didn't. The bulbs went up for sale, and nobody bid. Not at a high price, not at any price. And in that single silent moment, a terrible question rippled outward through the entire country. Wait, these are just flowers, aren't they? The panic that followed was instant and merciless. Everyone rushed to sell at the same time, and prices didn't just fall, they collapsed into nothing within days. Bulbs that had been worth a fortune in January were worthless by March. The people who had mortgaged their homes and sold everything they owned were left holding contracts for flowers nobody wanted, at prices nobody would ever pay again. Dealers refused to honor their deals. Debts couldn't be paid. Ordinary families who had bet everything on a beautiful streak of color were ruined, left with nothing but petals and regret. And here is why a 400-year-old flower crash should matter to you today. Because Tulip Mania was never really about tulips. It was about about human beings and a pattern inside us that has never once changed. Strip away the flowers, and the story is disturbingly familiar. A rising price convinces people something is valuable. Rising prices attract a crowd. The crowd pushes prices higher, which attracts a bigger crowd until people are no longer buying a thing for what it is, but only because it keeps going up. They stop asking what something is actually worth and start assuming someone else will always pay more. That is the anatomy of every bubble in history, and the tulip was simply the first one we wrote down. You have watched this exact story play out with different props. The same fever, the same crowd, the same certainty that this time is different has attached itself to internet stocks, to housing, to crypto coins, to every mania before and since. The names change, the flower changes, the human being at the center never does. Even Sir Isaac Newton, one of the smartest people who ever lived, lost a fortune in a bubble a century later and admitted he could calculate the motion of the planets, but not the madness of crowds. So the next time you see something whose price is exploding and everyone around you is rushing in, terrified of being left behind, certain they'll sell it to someone richer tomorrow, remember the tulip. Remember that the entire country of Holland, at the peak of its wealth and intelligence, once believed a flower was worth a house. The most expensive lesson in the world is learning, too late, the difference between what something costs and what it's actually worth. So tell me in the comments, what's the modern tulip? What are people buying today purely because it keeps going up? Because someone reading this might be standing in the middle of the next bubble right now without even knowing it. And if this story stuck with you, the next thing worth understanding is what actually gives money and assets real value in the first place. So you're never the last one holding the flower. This video is for education and entertainment only and is not financial advice.